Good evening and welcome to Public Affairs Public Access on Houston Media Source TV. I'm Gene Preuss with C60, and with me tonight, Ray Valdez and Mario Salinas. Welcome back, guys. Good to see you here. I want to start off this morning talking a little bit about something that happened very recently. It's 7:35 in the morning of April 21st, 2025. Jorge Mario Bergoglio, who's Pope Francis, died. The Vatican stated he had had a stroke and then a heart attack, and it was irreversible. He went into a coma. Of course, we don't, I mean, that was their statement. They did a little bit of investigating. They don't do autopsies, though. They don't embalm a pope when they pass away. He was born December 17th, 1936 in Buenos Aires, Argentina. He joined the Jesuits in 1958, was ordained a Catholic priest in 1969, and he was principal superior of the Argentinian Jesuits from 1973 to 1979. He was elevated to Archbishop of Buenos Aires in 1998, and Pope John Paul II elevated him to Cardinal in 2001, and then Ratzinger, the other Pope, after John Paul II, when he resigned from the papacy in 2013, on March 13th of that year, a conclave elected Bergoglio, who took the name Francis. And so we're here to talk about the transition of popes and how that affects the Hispanic community. Does it affect the Hispanic community? So Francis's death was rather sudden. I mean, he had been in the hospital for 5-6 weeks. He had pneumonia, and he only had a partial lung removed because of earlier problems. Got bronchitis. It spread to pneumonia in both lungs. He was put on a ventilator. It didn't look good, and then, suddenly he's out. He's being discharged. He makes a couple of appearances. The last one is on the 20th, which was Easter Sunday. He goes out, makes a speech, and then that night, early the next morning, he passes away. So kind of sudden, kind of unexpected, and yet not surprising. But it drew a lot of attention on who was going to be the next pope. Who was the church going to choose? These 130-something cardinals, when they met in conclave behind locked doors. And there was just a movie out about this. I don't know if either of you saw it.
Great movie.
Did you see it?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
So you can tell us what happens. But this mysterious set of circumstances and the process by which the Roman Catholic Church elects a pontiff drew a lot of television attention. And then the real amazing thing, despite what all the talking heads were saying, right? Because nobody said that it would be somebody from the Americas. Certainly not from the United States. I can't tell you how many times I heard people say they'll never elect an American because America's a big superpower. It's got a lot, they don't want somebody like that. And then, lo and behold, who steps out on the window? An American from Chicago, Robert Prevost. So what does this mean? What is this change going to happen? A lot of Hispanics are Catholic. A lot aren't.
Right.
Many who are don't practice. Right? Just like with any other religion, with any other faith, people go to a lot of churches, and they're not always wedded to it. So, but I think in the minds of a lot of people, and certainly in culture, Catholic Church plays an important role in the Hispanic community. We're not too far away from the first Spanish-speaking parish in Houston, Our Lady of Guadalupe, right? In the 1930s, that became a Spanish-speaking parish. So what does this mean? What is this change going to mean? I don't know. We don't know, but let's think about some of the things that it might mean. You can say, you heard it first, right here. Ray Valdez is responsible for saying
You
it.
want me to start?
I do want you to start. What do you think, Ray?
You know, I have not been a practicing Catholic since high school. And there's a lot of reasons, personal reasons, why I haven't gone back. But when I heard that the Pope had passed away, I was touched, because I saw that he was trying to make some changes, to change the culture of the church. Was trying to make it a little more progressive than it had been. And, they have been very conservative in the past, and that's, a lot of people have left because of that. But the politics of the church are the thing that keeps a lot of people away. We'd like to see some changes, but they may not happen as quickly as we want them to. I've been waiting for a long time, and, the things that I want to see change haven't changed. But so in terms of faith, it didn't impact me that much because, I'm not going to church on Sunday and I'm not listening to, all the stuff that's coming out of Rome. But, I did stop and think, what happens, to every, I didn't realize there were 1.4, billion Catholics across the world. And that surprised me because you would think, to me, is that with that kind of a following, you can change the outcome of any election. You can set policy in any country. Yet, it hasn't happened. It's always been a very soft approach when it comes to Rome dealing with a lot of these rogue countries that show no compassion for human rights violations. Anyway, I could go on and on that vein, but for me, it didn't have a lot of, direct impact in terms of, who's going to be my next spiritual leader?
Well, Ray, I'm not Catholic either, right? I was born a Catholic, but because of some family things, I did not come up as a Catholic, right? But I do think that at a time when we need some global leadership, that's why at least I thought, okay, who will be the next pope? Who will step out, on that world stage there? And, what will they state? What will be the values that they put out there, right? So I think it is a good thing to think about. Why Pope Leo now, right? What's going on in the world now that the folks behind those closed doors said, this is the man we need now.
Right. You were mentioning earlier that you watched the movie, the Conclave, right? So you have some kind of, Hollywood understanding of what happens behind, these closed doors, because it is a secret process that happens. And then they do talk about it afterwards and stuff. But, a lot of names come out in the beginning. It's a popularity contest. It's like going, and, then they just kind of hone in on this one person, but it takes several rounds of voting. And, people getting together and talking is like going to your political caucus to figure out who's going to be in charge.
That's a good analogy, I think. I talked to a canon lawyer at St. Thomas, and he was telling us that they're prohibited from electioneering, right? They can't campaign, they can't get get bumper stickers or anything like that, right? Because it's just the cardinals and just those under 80 when the Pope dies who can vote. And so right now, there's 265 cardinals, and only 133 can vote. So I jotted down some numbers here. 251 cardinals. 134 were under the age of 80 when Francis passed away. So they're the ones who can vote. 10 of them were from the United States, which is a drop in the bucket.
Right.
Right? That's not even 10%. So that's like 8%. I don't know. You're the math major.
No, I'm not. I'm not. But yeah, no, and I think it does speak to, again, why did they say we need a voice from the U.S., but one that has a global understanding, one that has done work in the global South, as it were, in Peru. And so, I mean, I think it may have been, and again, we don't know, but I think it may have been that they thought we need an alternative voice that is coming out of the U.S. on a global scale.
Well, it's interesting because the talking heads, as before the Pope actually comes out and addresses his flock, were saying that he was very similar in terms of his views as the Pope who had just passed away, and that they were seeing that maybe there was going to be a continuation of a lot of his policies in the way that he was dealing with the world and these world leaders. And which was interesting, and what I thought is, we just had Vance come and visit with him, and it didn't go so well, on that one visit. But then again, afterwards, Vance came back when the new Pope was installed. And
Vance saw him the day before he died.
Right. And so, to me, it's like, maybe there is some hope that we can have some softening, in terms of the United States approach to human rights. I mean, it seems like we become this oppressive state for all of these, what we're calling illegal immigrants, right? We're treating them like criminals. And so, we need to take I think we need a little softer approach. And hopefully, I would like to see this new Pope, take on that issue.
I think it's interesting that you just said it didn't really affect you, but you did watch the coverage. You did watch a lot of the things that were happening, right? It was in the news. A lot of people saw it, and whether or not I think it affects them,
We're
it
aware.
interested them, right?
Yeah, I was aware.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of those things you hold out hope that things will change enough to where, you want to go back and be a practicing Catholic, but again, like I was saying earlier before the show started, there's going to be some challenges for me, some barriers I'd have to overcome before that happens.
Well, I mean, I think that's true of anybody in whatever faith they're in, is that, it's what the faith teaches, what I believe. This is something, and excuse me, I've said this in class before, is that we tend to think that people in politics, in religion, in a lot of other things, just in culture in general, right, is like, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I'm a Baptist, I'm a Catholic, I'm Buddhist and stuff, and that, okay, well, here is your list,
Right.
Here is your list of beliefs, you have to own that, and that's what you have to believe. But that's not how people really behave, right? We're cafeteria. You come along and say, I like this belief. I don't like that, right? I like this, and we adapt different beliefs, and especially in a multicultural society that the United States is, and here in Texas, right? We've got 92 different languages being spoken. We can go down and get as Mayor Nice Parker used to say, right? You can go down and you can get almost any type of food you want within a 30-minute drive.
Yep.
From all over the world. And I think in this type of environment, we get different ideas, different beliefs from different people, and we adapt them.
Well, I mean, on that note too, it was sad, I think, to see people instantly try to fit the new pope into either a blue box or a red box here in the U.S., right? And that's the thing. Like, we need to your point, learn that we can be adults with our own minds and say, I'll take a bit of this, bit of that, hold this, I'll have extra of that, and that's okay. Because in the end, I think it all boils down to how are we treating each other? Right here in one of the most diverse cities in the U.S., how are we interacting with each other? And if I say, oh, you're a blue, I can deal with you, or you're a this, I can deal with you, are we truly stepping up to this chance that we have to be an example to the rest of the U.S.? And I'll add this. I think it's a very interesting idea to cap the voting age at 80, right? Because you're on your last chapters there. Should your point of view really hold sway to what occurs after you're gone? I don't know.
No, that's kind of interesting because, I mean, a lot of the doctrine is old doctrine. It's like leave unto Caesar, right? Whatever it is about the state, separation of the church and state. And to this day, that still is kind of the way they operate. But, I mean, that's a long time back. You think we would have had a shift by now.
That's a really great point. I want to talk about that. Right now, I want to remind everybody you're listening to Public Affairs, Public Access on Houston Media Source TV. I'm Gene Preuss with Mario Salinas and Ray Valdez, C60, and this is, we're bringing you this show talking about things that are affecting the Hispanic community here in the Houston area. So, 1960, this book came out by a Catholic priest, probably, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of him, John Courtney Murray, an American. He was talking about church-state relations. And he's specifically talking about how the church works in the United States. Got him on Time Magazine's front cover. It came out when a candidate named John F. Kennedy was running for office. Kennedy was a Catholic. In fact, he came here to Houston to made a speech to members of a Baptist congregation that says, look, I'm a Catholic, but that doesn't mean I answer to the Pope, right? I'm, as a candidate, as a politician, I'm going to, as a leader, if you elect me, I'm going to represent us, the United States. And this is kind of what Courtney Murray was saying, is that in the United States, it's different from Catholicism elsewhere. In Catholicism elsewhere, what the Catholic Church in the 19th century, up until Vatican II, liked was this idea of we'll have a church and a state with a church religion, and we all follow the appointed leaders, not appointed, but hereditary monarchs, right? We follow them, they support the church, and that's the natural order of things. Murray says it doesn't work that way in the United States, and it works well in the United States, right? We've got church-state relations, and a lot of people in the Vatican didn't like that. In fact, Murray was told, you can't write anymore, you can't speak anymore, just be quiet, talk about other things, right? Don't talk about this anymore. 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, 1960, So that's where it stood. 1963, he was appointed a assistant to Vatican II, and he wrote the document, 16 documents of Vatican II, and one of them was on church-state relations. It was his brainchild, talking about how you. And so this idea of where does the church end, where does it begin? For almost 2,000 years, they were wedded together. I mean, you had problems like the French Revolution and Council of Trent and all that, which, kind of threw that on end. And the church never really recovered. And we're still fumbling and struggling until Vatican II, when they said, we're going to change things. You can have democracy. You can participate. And I think one of the things that we tend to do, going back to what the talking heads say, and putting people in boxes and try to say, we want this kind of a pope, we want this kind of a pope, is that we look at it from an American perspective. And that's not how the rest of those 1.4 billion people are looking at it, or what they're living in. And so I think, we're looking at it through our lens, through our filter, and not everybody is. And so that's an issue, right? I don't know if it's a problem, but it's something to think about.
Well, I think that, when we learn about how this part of the world was colonized, right, and how the church and the crown worked hand in hand to win over hearts and minds here, and if you didn't fall in, they would cut off your head, right? So here there's a deep history of, is this the same church now as then? And of course the answer is no, right? And of course institutions grow, change. They might have stood for raw power then. I don't know if they still stand for that now. And so now, they may even be a counterpoint to that. Whereas our partisan culture here in the U.S. has become one of, again, raw power, win by any means. So, for me, it makes me think of how institutions can rise, change, because when you talk about even the institutions of the U.S. government, right? We're starting to see that those might not be as steadfast as we would have thought. So,
Right.
There's these bigger things going on. And I think, again, having Pope Leo there as one point of view in that is it's a good thing, right?
Well, he's just one voice
Right.
amongst many
Right.
when it comes to religion. If we look at the world, there's so many variations of faith. Some people believe in A and others are over here with Z. And, we try to get along, but a lot of times we don't. And just like you think that when you're looking at religion, you're thinking about peace and people living together in some type of harmony. But that's not always the case. If religion really met its goal, then we wouldn't have had all these people burning the churches, not the churches, but the courthouses in Texas, and getting rid of all the deeds and stealing all the land, and subjugating and oppressing all the sheep of the Catholic Church. But it happened.
That's the real question, right? Is that we talk about how, in the United States, we talk a lot about how much religion means to us, right? We look at our history and we say, oh, the Puritans did this, and we were very religious, and this is a nation built on faith and whatnot. But if we look at our actions, they don't always reflect that.
No, I mean, all I had to do is say, this girl who rejected me is a witch, and we're burning her tomorrow, Yeah. It's crazy.
I'm glad you weren't around.
Well, right.
Well, that's the unfortunate part. We were around.
Yeah,
And I've always thought, having grown up, I was exposed to a lot of evangelical churches, right? We left the Catholic Church, and we would kind of, hop from one to the other. So I was exposed to all of that. And now, as an adult, I think it's all about, does your faith make you a better neighbor, right? Is your faith rooted in what you stand for, right? What are those things that you hold up? Or, and to your point, Ray, it can be based upon those things that you push down, that you stand against, right? And there are some parts of the world where it's very much, this is my faith, which is anti-this, 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 anti-this. And I think that we look for leaders, or at least I do, that can talk about this is what I rise up, this is what I stand for. And that's how you build things, right? And not tear things.
Well, I understand the concept of faith. I like to think that I have a certain spirituality, and I loved going to Bible class when I was a kid. But it wasn't until I got older and started questioning things that I started disagreeing with the human component, because as humans we're flawed, and those flaws, they manifest themselves sometimes in a very negative way. And those, have huge impact on people's lives. And we've seen this over time, with all these sexual abuse cases that came up, and the way that the church addressed them, and the protection that they offered to some of these individuals, right? And we expect better from our leaders. At least I do.
But why do we expect more from our leaders? Because it's not just in religion, right?
We're putting our faith in them to be good people and to do the right thing.
So let me ask you a question, and I've asked you guys this years ago. Why do we put, not just religious leaders, even politicians, because we hear the same thing with when local politicians or state or national politicians
everywhere,
behave badly. I hear people say this, they're our leaders, but religious leaders aside, because that takes on a little different thing, but for our state leaders, are they our leaders, or are they supposed to represent us?
It's hard. I think that, the representative form of government worked back in, 1,000 years ago. But do I really need someone to represent my opinion when I'm quite capable of doing that myself?
Well, you got social media.
I do.
Well, but when it's one of their jobs to create the laws, you would hope that your point of view is a part of that, right? And yes, I do think that it's very much about, or I think the way it should be is very much about, do the trains run on time, right? Does your trash get picked up if you call
Not in this town.
911? Do they come out, right? Those are the very bread and butter
Well,
things
that's-
that a
But that's
local
it's an interesting
government
point. Is what
should
is
do.
the bread and butter of the Catholic Church? I mean, what is their mission now?
Well,
I don't know. I haven't. I've been gone too long to
Ray,
know.
I'll tell you this. A few weeks ago, a local community leader passed, and I went to his funeral mass at St. Joseph's Church, and this is where I was baptized.
That's the one in the first ward, right?
Yes, it's in Sixth Ward.
Okay.
Sixth Ward. My granddad was the grounds keeper there, right? He knew every screw, everything. He laid the brick down on the patio there in time for my mom and dad to have their marriage there. As a baby, I would look at the mural above the altar, and that was my first exposure to art. So, all of these years later, I'm there, and of course, it seems a lot smaller than it did, but I have people around me that I've interacted with that knew me ever since I was born, and other folks that I encountered as I grew up. And I think for me, that is the most bread and butter thing that any church should offer, and that's what community, right? Community.
Yeah.
But I think that, Ray, you bring up a really good question that people should think about. Okay, so in the great scheme of the Catholic Church, holy orders, what priests take, right? That is called a sacrament of service. Their job, the priests take an oath and a vow to serve the congregation, the flock, through life. Their job, right before Easter, on Holy Thursday, Maundy Thursday, from the word service, they wash feet of some members in their parish. The priest will wash the feet of members of their parish at Mass, because they are supposed to serve, take on the role of servants. But a lot of times, I think, and this is not just the Catholic Church, but in a lot of churches, we say the ministers are the leaders, right? The preachers are the leaders. It's their job to go out and do the work. I get to come in here, sit on the pew, enjoy things, sing a few songs, and feel good, and then go home and let them do the work. When really, they're supposed to be serving us to help us participate. And we have just said, you guys do all the work. We're going to enjoy it and, see you next Sunday, maybe.
Well, and I do think that there is an aspect of it that a lot of both our church institutions and our government institutions have moved away from that bread and butter, basic aspect of it into what? Being content creators, right? They're just up there to create a buzz. They're up there to create ripples in the culture wars, right? And it's that
The sound bites, is that what you're talking about?
sound bites, us against them, and it's that kind of thing that might get you likes, shares on social media, right? But does that do good for us
Okay,
living
before
here?
you answer that, I want to remind everybody, you're watching social media here on Public Affairs, Public Access on Houston Media Source TV with C60. So Ray, taking his cue, his question, I want you to talk about this.
No,
or give me your thoughts. But hold on, what about AI? I'm going to add AI and deep fakes to that.
To me, a lot of times, and people say you're just really cynical, that, you just have got this predisposition to not like organized religion. And maybe some of that is true, but I look at, some of the things that have happened over time. It's like, we had the Old Testament. People didn't like it so much. God was kind of mean back then, right? So they come up with a New Testament. It's more of a hit, but they only they preach. They only preach the good stuff.
Right.
The peace, love, happiness kind of stuff. All the bad things that happen, they don't talk about that so much. And there's a lot of stories in the Bible that didn't end well, right? So there's this marketing aspect in there.
To everything.
To everything, right? And so, I think it's important as a kid going to catechism class and stuff, they read you some of the stuff from the Old Testament and it kind of scares you, and then the nun comes with a ruler and she scares you some more.
Yeah.
So there's this whole motivation, of physical motivation and fear there, right?
Right.
And some of that lingers and it stays with you. Right, and so when you see and you say that these are my spiritual leaders in church, right? And shouldn't they be setting a better example?
Yes, and I do think that's why, again, going back to the conclave, that may be why, Leo was the choice there, but. Gene, to your AI question, right? I mean, I think people spend too much time staring at screens all day as it is. I mean, if we step back and think about this, how much time in a day do I spend looking into the eyes of my neighbor, my spouse, my kids, and having a real connection with them, as opposed to how much time in a day am I looking at this thing?
Wait,
right?
how many phones do you have?
Right, one for work, one for, right. And see, that's the thing. And when we talk about AI, right, faith, I have seen faith pull people I know through some very hard times, right? That's why I don't knock it, because it's pulled them through. It's given them a place to belong. But I do think that more and more the internet and AI and all this other stuff is becoming a place where folks think they are a part of something bigger. And we have to ask, is that the kind of quote unquote space that we want our young people to be growing up in. And then when you add an AI and say, well, I saw the Pope state this and I saw this person state that, and they don't know if it's real or if it isn't, it kind of turns everything on its ear.
I want to share something with you guys. So you're talking about, playing off what you're talking about here. So there's been a lot of discussion about what Preuss is going to do, the new Pope, Francis, not Francis, but Benedict, not Leo.
Leo, the
There's 267 of them. I had to memorize.
14th.
What was number 45?
Yeah, exactly. So what Leo has said, he hasn't said very much, right? He's been Pope for a couple weeks. So this came out on the 12th. This is his first address. Here's what he said. This paragraph here on the second page, in the middle of the page here. Today, one of the most important challenges is to promote communication that brings us out of the Tower of Babel, which we sometimes find ourselves, out of the confusion of the loveless languages that are often ideological or partisan. As you know, communication is not only the transmission of information, but it's also the creation of culture, of human and digital environments that become space for dialogue and discussion. I am thinking in particular, and I'm skipping around here, I'm thinking in particular of artificial intelligence with its immense potential, which nevertheless requires responsibility and discernment in order to ensure that it can be used for the good of all so that it can benefit all humanity. The responsibility concerns everyone in proportion to his or her age and the role in society. We're seeing people be able to create videos of anybody, right? Of somebody saying whatever they want them to say, right? Or doing what they want them to do. And it's our young people. You've got 2 granddaughters. And our young people are very much influenced. We see people who have committed suicide over things that have just been on regular social media, right? Bullying and sharing bad images. What is AI going, how is it going to change it, exacerbate that, make it even worse, or perhaps better?
I don't know. One of the things that I've always believed, part of my faith is that if you believe in God, you have to believe in the devil, because there they go again. Unfortunately, the devil was the guy that represents evil. Now, that probably wasn't the way it all started out, but that's the way it's evolved, right? And so anything can be used for good or evil. And, we define what that is as a people, as a community. And so it goes back to our spiritual leaders. They have to have that open mind. They have to be able to run it through the filters, unfortunately, of what our religion is, and then come back with us with the answer of what the appropriate response is. We don't need AI to pervert something for us. We have these interpreters already that can do that for us.
I recall that when the written word or the printing press came about,
That's the devil.
Folks said, folks honestly stated that's going to make people lazy, right? People won't have to know anything anymore because if it's there, then you don't need to know it anymore, right?
Plato said that.
There you go. So again, I'm not anti-tech.
Right.
What I am is what is that tech doing to us, right? Like I had to learn. I had to learn all the state capitals when I was growing up. do kids today have to learn that, right? No, right? And then we ask, well, why do they have to if they can just
Look it up.
Google it, right? But again, I always ask, what if these things aren't here forever, right? What are we going to do then? And so I do think that God made us. God made us capable of what? Thought. God made us think, made us capable of creating things, art, culture, right? And so if we leave that to others, right? If we leave that to AI, will we have a chance to get in touch with that within us?
Right.
But what is the bad thing about AI? What is the thing people are concerned about? It's not that they're creating things. I mean, because any type of art, right? You can go back 1,000 years, and people were worried about, putting on these plays. You're putting on these plays, and you have questionable morals, or you don't have the right
Don
morals.
Giovanni.
Yeah,
Right.
and it's not just a Christian, it's not just a religious thing, because certainly before there were religions, there were morals.
Right.
People, do not kill, that transcends a lot of things. But the question is, as you pointed out, I think you're right, is that it is amoral, and not amoral in a bad way, but just it doesn't have morality, right? It's not a good moral
It's
or
a
bad moral.
tool.
It's
It's a tool,
neutral,
right.
and so it can be used either way. And so, photographs, let's say,
Right.
We can say we can take photographs, and they can be of flowers and of children and of dogs and cats and happy stuff, or it can be pornography,
Right.
which some people like, but a lot of people don't.
Don't be
right?
looking at me.
But
Right.
we get that whole moral standards idea, right?
It's a tool.
It's a tool, and
It
then
is.
and it's, as you say, then we define
But-
is it acceptable or unacceptable?
Right. And perceptions, you can hear someone say something or do something and just take it the wrong way just because you misunderstood.
Right, right.
And that
Is it-
creates a
yeah.
lot of problems in itself.
Yeah.
Gene, but I think that yes, it's a tool, but here's the thing. Kids are being raised by this tool, right? I mean, again, a tool is what a shovel, it could be a firearm, right? It's a tool. Typically, we say, okay, now you're old enough, you're strong enough to learn how to use this tool. And it can be used for good, it can be used for other stuff too. But I always think about if a baby grows up with this, and this helps shape how their mind grows, works, then that is a very big thing, right? And we all know that we cannot go out to the grocery store out to eat without some small child being there just hooked on that, right?
There's this little shop, a little vape shop down the street from this school, this well-known elementary school, and the parents are very worried that their children are going to be going after school to this vape shop and buying these products. But if you ever drive by this shop, there's only adults in there buying this product. So where is that behavior being learned?
I'm concerned about adults using that too. But so let me ask you a question. Let me just throw this out there.
Sure.
This is like throwing a Molotov cocktail out there.
Oh, good. Ready.
Are you suggesting, Mario, that it's maybe us as parents, us as siblings, us as adults, us as a community that needs to be taking responsibility. Why shouldn't we be turning this over to our leaders to tell us what's good and what's bad?
Yes.
You know, it goes back to, you know, why do we call them leaders? Because, you know, they're supposed to be out in front.
So should we be calling them leaders?
Well, should we? Of course not. No, but, you know, I mean, I've seen, you know, some of these guys who are just completely off base. You know, you listen to them and you think to yourself, why would any sane person ever listen to this and follow, you know, this direction? And then I realized it's because there's a lot of crazies out there, you know?
You know, the other day I used a term that I hadn't heard in a long time, and it was what? Thought leader. Thought leader, right? Who is it that we look to get us to think and get us to say, hey, yeah, I agree, or I don't? And that's the thing. I don't know, at least in the political world, if we have any real thought leaders out there. I think we have content creators, but I don't know if we have people who are pushing us to elevate our thinking.
Now, there's people out there who don't want you to elevate other people's thinking. They want a nice little docile herd, want the flock to be manageable and don't have a lot of strays, you know, want everybody to kind of stay in a group. But, you know, thought can be, you know, again, it can be good and it can be bad.
It's work. It's work too, right?
But, you know, so if you look at the job that you do, the work that you do, you have people come in every day to your center and they're looking to you for guidance. You know, you have all these resources that are available to you inside of a small world. You know, 1/4 of the county is managed by, you know, your commissioner. And within that, you know, that fiefdom, right, there's a lot you can do.
Right.
And they're counting on you to provide that service. But if someone walks in and you don't like them, or they strike you the wrong way, you know, you can also cause them, you know, discomfort.
Well, and on that, no. I mean,
Because you
serve
have a moral
everyone,
compass?
unless they're out to cause me harm or anyone else there. But no, everyone that comes in, if they ask for this or that, that's why I'm there. I don't ask them, well, how do you think about this, or who did you vote for? No.
Is it because you would be doing that even if they weren't paying you?
I think so. I mean, look, that's my whole thing, is that we need to learn how to treat each other better.
Okay, so let me, here's a statement from the League of United Latin American Citizens.
Can't trust these guys.
You've got a minute each, but I've got some time here, so let me read this to you. So today is a day of profound significance, not only for the Catholic faithful, but all who believe in the power of unity and service, said the LULAC national president. Pope Leo the 14th's elevation is a historic moment for the people of faith in the United States, especially those from diverse and often marginalized communities. His life reflects a commitment to crossing borders and embracing people of every race, gender, identity, background, and socioeconomic status. LULAC celebrates this moment with deep respect and hope that the Church will continue to reflect the beauty of all humanity. 1 minute, Mario, reaction?
So off of that statement, I did like how they stated that they hope Pope Leo will have leadership rooted in compassion, justice, and peace. And we need more of that.
Right.
Ray?
Well, as a LULAC member, we had high hopes when Trump was president the first time. And we got invited, went to the White House, and went to one meeting with his cabinet, and that was the last time we were invited to the White House. They just didn't like our agenda, what we were saying. They wanted us to, go away, shift away from your civil rights stances, and just get in line and support us, right? So we have hope. We always have hope that the Pope will help to drive our civil rights agenda.
Very good. Ray, I always like it when you have the last word,
No, you
except
don't.
because I get a couple of words after that. So, Ray Valdez, Mario Salinas, I want to thank you for coming together again. And it's good to be back on the show. It's good to have both of you here. For Houston Media Source TV, I'm Gene Preuss. For C60, and this has been Public Affairs, Public Access. Thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll see you again very soon. Good night.
It's interesting, Mary.